Hello and welcome to the Wedge Adjustment. This is Mark Wedge, columnist for NASCAR Nation, welcoming you to a brand new feature of the NASCAR Nation blog. This is going to be a weekly sportscast where we're going to talk about all the issues in the sport. We're going to talk about whatever race was the previous weekend, whatever race is coming up the next weekend, and then we're going to be basically covering anything that we would normally write articles about. And that doesn't mean that articles will be disappearing or that we're going to stop writing them. But this will be a new edition and, more content for you to enjoy. So, thank you for listening, and if you have any comments for us, please drop them, below this post if you have a WordPress account or on the Facebook post for questions or anything you want me to talk about specifically. So, welcome to the inaugural show, and we're going to start out by talking about Stewart-Haas Racing in 2014. This is a team that has been really strong and also has had some pretty serious struggles, mostly mechanically. You look at their performance, and especially with the Ford team of Kevin Harvick, it's been pretty good, but they've had some mechanical failures. And this started in speed weeks at Daytona. You had a couple Stewart-Haas engines blow up, and we've seen that happen to Kevin Harvick's team and Kurt Busch's team in the first few races this season. Now, that hasn't stopped Kevin Harvick from being one of the strongest competitors so far when he's actually been running on the track. He dominated Phoenix in the win that he got there, the first one for Stewart-Haas this season, and ever since then, it's been a comedy of errors mechanically for that team. They had the brake issues at Las Vegas, they had the engine go up in smoke at Bristol, and they've dropped from like 6th in the points where they were after Phoenix all the way back out of the top 20, which is kind of unfortunate for that team because they really are one of the strongest competitors. Now, there's no question about it that he's going to be in the chase. There's no question about it in my mind that he's going to be one of the serious competitors in the chase, too. I think he, Dale Earnhardt Jr., and Brad Keselowski so far are the three strongest as far as who's in the chase, but, there are a lot of changes in the sport. And, the teams that are strong now might not be strong later in the year, so we'll see how the season progresses for them. I think that's one thing that is actually working in Kurt Busch's advantage. He is driving the 41 for Stewart-Haas Racing, and they've been lackluster. They haven't really gotten their stride yet, and I think it's mostly because of the changes. And I think they are in a position to take advantage of teams that are good now that are going to kind of miss a step later in the season, whereas the 41 has a chance to get better. And I think we saw him do that with Furniture Row last year, where the second half of the season was a lot more productive for him than the first half. So looking at the 41, that's what I see ahead for them. Kurt Busch, obviously a very talented driver, past champion. I don't think he'll have any issue once that team kind of gets a hold of themselves and gets their grip on these changes in the sport. Now, looking at Tony Stewart's team, the 14, the head cheese over at Stewart-Haas Racing, Bristol was a top 10 finish for them. And Bristol is a race that is traditionally very hard for drivers. It's very grueling, especially on the legs. And, Tony Stewart, I don't think, is going to have that injury be a problem going forward, because if it wasn't a problem at Bristol, it's probably not going to be a problem at tracks where it's not as difficult physically. So good news there. Tony Stewart looks like he's back in action. So watch the 14 to start being competitive and kind of joining Kevin Harvick and being the one of the better teams at Stewart-Haas. Watch the 41 to come along later in the season, but I think the 14 and the 4 are the two to watch early in the season. And then there's the 10 of Danica Patrick. She has had an improvement, I think. She's running in the lower 20s now. Her, usual finish when she doesn't wreck is low 20s, which is better than it was last season at the same time. She just needs to stop wrecking. And I think that Darrell Waltrip on Sunday made a good point when he said it's got to be something that isn't clicking with that team that is resulting in her always having wreck issues. She's a fine driver. She did well in the Nationwide Series. She was obviously very good in IndyCar. I can't imagine that it's all her. I mean, some of it is, but I can't imagine that it's all her. I think there's something at Stewart-Haas and that team that isn't clicking. It's not working out. Maybe she's not getting exactly what she needs out of her spotter. Who knows? But, that needs to be fixed if the 10 team is ever to become, very competitive. But I do see improvement with the 10. So, give old Danica a break, because I do see improvement there. And, she has a great crew of people around her. If you look at the other drivers that she's working with, I mean, Stewart-Haas is now one of those organizations that people are calling a super team, just like Hendrick. Over at Hendrick, the shop, you have Jeff Gordon, Casey Kane, and then you have Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Jimmy Johnson. And if that's not a super team, I don't know what is. But now you look at Stewart-Haas, and you have Kurt Busch, past champion. Tony Stewart, past champion. Kevin Harvick, by all rights, a champion, even though he doesn't have a trophy. And then you have Danica, who has, 3 very experienced drivers there to help her grow. She just needs that thing that's missing. There's something not right with that 10 team. And I hope they figure it out, because I see a lot of potential in Danica Patrick. But, we'll watch and see. She is improving, though. Believe me when I say that. She is improving. Now, another thing that came to the forefront this past weekend was a long-held fan stickler issue in the Nationwide Series. And that is that Sprint Cup regulars keep winning everything in the Nationwide Series and taking the wins away from the Nationwide drivers. Kyle Busch, surprise, surprise, big shocker here, won the Nationwide race at Bristol. And, once again, this issue of Cup drivers taking home the hardware Nationwide Series came to the forefront. So, NASCAR has acknowledged that there's an issue there. They've acknowledged that fans, have a right to be upset about this, but they've said there's really nothing we can do. And if you look at why that is, you got to look at the sponsors. You got to follow the money. Because sponsors see the Nationwide Series, as most people do, as kind of the equivalent of AA or AAA baseball to the MLB. They don't have as much to put into the sport, and they'd rather take, their chances with a Cup regular running those races than they would some young driver who's still learning how to race. And so the problem has become that in their negotiations with teams, they've said, well, we want a Cup driver to run this number of events with us as their sponsor. And so you have guys like Kyle Busch and Brad Keselowski coming in every week, so these Nationwide teams can have enough funding to run their cars. And as a result, you have Cup drivers winning every week. So what NASCAR is kind of looking at is this catch-22, where if you say, Cup drivers can not run in the Nationwide Series, or they can only run a certain number of events, then sponsors are not going to be happy, and you're not going to get as much sponsor money. And as a result, you're going to have some teams close up shop because they can't afford to field any race cars. If you leave it as it is, then the fans are unhappy, the racing is dull and predictable, and you start losing the series that way. And, also with leaving it the way it is, the Nationwide Series kind of loses its purpose for existing. It's for the young drivers to learn how to race in a touring national series. And, as it is right now, they're learning how to race in it, but they're not winning in it. And fans are getting kind of bored seeing the Cup drivers like Kyle Busch and Keselowski win the trophy every weekend. So if you have any ideas on how to solve the problem, please comment at the bottom of this post if you have a WordPress account, or comment on our Facebook page on this post. And, I'm sure we'll be talking about this issue again in the future, and we'll definitely talk about the ideas that you post. But it's a challenge. I can't see any way that NASCAR can solve it in the short run, especially with their focus on changes in the Cup Series. I really kind of don't want them to address this yet. I want the Cup Series to be as good as it can be first. My idea for it would be to have it, if you ever watch the Rolex 24 or Sebring or anything like that with, multiple classes of cars on the track at one time, that would be my idea for the Nationwide Series. You have a separate running order for Cup drivers, separate running order for Nationwide drivers, and, you have 2 winners basically every week, one in the Cup class, one in the Nationwide class. And, one would be the owner's points probably, and one would be the driver's standings, which people really care about. I've never met anybody that gets really excited about the owner points in the Nationwide Series. It's kind of lame, in my opinion, but, they got to do something to fix the driver points and making that more exciting. So looking ahead, this weekend, NASCAR is rolling into Fontana, California for the Auto Club 400 at Auto Club Speedway. And this was a very exciting race last year. We just did a post earlier today about, last year's conflict between Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin that resulted in that famous or infamous wreck that took Hamlin out for many, many weeks. And it was one of the best finishes of the year as far as racing. Even though that was kind of overshadowed by the crash and all that, it was still one of the best finishes that we saw in 2013. So I'm excited for this weekend. I think it's going to be a very good race. And I think California reminds me of some of the tracks we run over the summer, like Pocono, like Michigan especially. So I think it's kind of a good preview for what we might see out of some teams later in the year, assuming they keep up with the changes in the sport. So what can we look for this weekend? Well, I think watch the Ford camp. If you look at who won Michigan over the summer last year, it was Greg Biffle the first time, Joey Logano the second time. Those were two Ford drivers. I think if you look at the three manufacturers, as far as development, Ford has had the most drastic improvement and the fastest pace of development. And I think that's going to be crucial for this year in the sport, where there's so many different things kind of moving. Different rule packages, different, tech specs, anything like that. I think speed of adaptation is going to be very critical for manufacturers, and I see that at a Ford right now. Now, Toyota won the race last season, and I'm expecting them to certainly be very strong, and Chevrolet as well. What I'm seeing that I'm liking in the Cup Series right now is all three manufacturers are about even, and that's something that we were missing last year. Ford was so far behind the other two. And now I think everybody's kind of on even playing field. I think Toyota's due for a win. I think one of the Gibbs cars is probably going to be a favorite to win. As far as who I'm going to pick, I'm leaning Ford, but I'm tempted by the Toyotas of Joe Gibbs Racing. I don't see Michael Waltrip Racing Toyotas kind of being at the same level yet this season. But I would bet on a Gibbs car if I was going to go Toyota. And Chevrolet, you got the usual suspects, Hendrick, Stewart-Haas, any of those guys would probably be a good bet. Richard Childress Racing, I'm actually pretty impressed with Ryan Newman. He has really stepped up that 31 team, and I think he was a good fit to put in that car, and he's been running very consistently, and he's been doing very well. So watch the 31 to win a race at some point coming up. I think it'll be soon, because that team has... they're another group that has shown a lot of improvement. They're kind of like, they're not quite on the same level as the guys leading the points, but they could definitely get there by the end of the season. And as far as this weekend goes, I think it'll be a nice testing ground for them for races later in the season. But this weekend, I'm probably going with a Ford driver, whether it's Penske, Roush, or even Petty, because they had a good showing at Bristol. But I think it's going to be one of them. So... we'll look forward to a good race this weekend. I think it's going to be one of the better ones of the year again. It's a very wide racetrack, a lot of 3 and 4 wide, and a lot of speed. So, should be an exciting finish, should be an exciting event. And, check back into the blog to see our admin championship picks, and, our race updates and all of that good stuff. So, I am actually all out of time for the first inaugural episode of the Wedge Adjustment. Thank you so much for listening. Drop us a comment on the Facebook page or on the WordPress post here if you have an account. And, if you have any questions or topics that you want to hear discussed on the show, let me know and I'll get to as many of them as I possibly can. And tune in next week, because there will be another episode probably around the same time, probably around Tuesday. And it should be a lot of fun. I'm really excited about this new feature of the blog. I think it's a good way to get even more content out there for you. So tell a friend about NASCAR Nation. We're still trying to build this community and provide a better forum for all of you. And we think the more people that we have, the more fun it'll be. So thank you so much for listening. Mark Wedge here for the Wedge Adjustment, and I will see you at the racetrack.